It's 3 a.m. at the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Young women are sleeping peacefully in their beds after a typical college evening. The house sits quietly on West Jefferson Street just outside campus, where students feel safe and secure. Then, in the darkness, a man enters through a back door with a faulty lock. He carries a piece of oak firewood like a club. Within minutes, 2 young women lie dead, and 2 others are brutally beaten. The attacker disappears into the Florida night as quickly as he came. Quick question: where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments.
But this final rampage was actually the end of a 4-year killing spree that had terrorized the entire western United States. The man responsible looked nothing like what people expected a monster to look like. He was charming, educated, and seemed like the perfect catch. But behind that mask was one of America's most cunning serial killers. This story begins on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. Accused is back with another deep dive into the cases that changed criminal investigation forever. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We post cases like this every week. This is a story that revolutionized how we understand serial killers. We're bringing you the psychological manipulation the FBI didn't initially understand, the escapes that embarrassed law enforcement, and the final mistakes that brought down America's most notorious killer. This is how Ted Bundy played a deadly game of cat and mouse with police for over 4 years. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell to an unwed mother in Burlington, Vermont. His early life was built on a lie. He grew up believing his mother Louise was actually his sister and that his grandparents were his parents. This deception would shape his ability to live double lives. Even as a child, there were warning signs that something was deeply wrong. He was caught looking through windows, stealing, and showing disturbing behavior toward animals. But to the outside world, Ted seemed normal and even impressive. He was intelligent, earning good grades and eventually attending the University of Washington to study psychology. He was charming and articulate, traits that would later make him deadly. His first serious relationship was with Elizabeth Klopfer in 1969, a single mother who found Ted warm and loving. But beneath this perfect exterior, something dark was growing. Ted had developed an obsession with violent pornography and was becoming increasingly antisocial. By 1974, he had perfected his mask of normalcy, and the killing was about to begin.
The terror started on January 4th, 1974, when Ted broke into the basement apartment of 18-year-old Karen Sparks, a University of Washington student. He beat her with a metal rod from her bed frame and sexually assaulted her with the same weapon. Karen survived, but suffered permanent brain damage that left her with hearing and vision problems. But Ted wasn't finished. Just weeks later, on February 1st, 1974, he entered the basement room of 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy.
Linda was a psychology major who worked part-time giving ski reports on local radio. She was well-liked, full of life, and had her whole future ahead of her. Ted beat her unconscious, dressed her in jeans and a blouse, and carried her away into the night. Her roommates found her bed carefully made the next morning, with just a small blood stain on the pillow. Linda had become Ted's first known murder victim. Over the next several months, young women began disappearing from the Seattle area at an alarming rate, about 1 per month. All of Ted's victims shared similar characteristics. They were young, attractive women, with long, dark hair parted in the middle. They looked remarkably like his first serious girlfriend. Ted had developed a specific method for luring his victims. He would approach them in public places, often wearing a fake cast on his arm or using crutches to appear injured and non-threatening. He was handsome and well-spoken, exactly the type of person young women would help without hesitation. On July 14th, 1974, at the popular Lake Sammamish State Park, multiple witnesses saw a charming man who called himself Ted approach young women asking for help loading his sailboat. That day, both 23-year-old Janice Ott and 19-year-old Denise Naslin disappeared. Witnesses gave police detailed descriptions of the suspect, and even described his Volkswagen Beetle. But despite having a name, physical description, and car details, police still couldn't identify the killer. Ted was hiding in plain sight, and by August 1974, he was accepted to law school at the University of Utah and moved to Salt Lake City. Question for you. You're in a parking lot when a clean-cut, well-dressed man with his arm in a sling approaches asking for help loading something into his car. He seems educated and friendly. Do you, A, help immediately without thinking, B, help but stay alert to your surroundings, C, politely decline and walk away, or D, leave the area quickly? Keep your answer in mind as we see how Ted used this exact scenario to trap his victims. The killing continued in Utah, but now Ted was making his first serious mistakes. On November 8, 1974, he approached 18-year-old Carol DeRanch at a mall, posing as a police officer. He told her someone had tried to break into her car and asked her to come with him to file a report. But Carol quickly realized something was wrong. When Ted tried to handcuff her, he accidentally put both cuffs on the same wrist. Carol fought back and escaped, becoming one of the few people to survive a direct encounter with Ted Bundy. Then came the traffic stop that changed everything. On August 16, 1975, Utah Highway Patrol officer Bob Hayward pulled over Ted's Volkswagen in the early morning hours. Something felt wrong about the situation, so Hayward searched the car. Inside, he found handcuffs, rope, a ski mask, and a crowbar. What police called a burglar's kit. But what we now know were Ted's murder tools. Ted was arrested for the first time, but his legal knowledge helped him make bail quickly. In March 1976, Carol DeRanch identified Ted in a police lineup as the man who tried to abduct her. This led to his first conviction for aggravated kidnapping. While serving his sentence in Utah, Ted was charged with the murder of Corinne Campbell in Colorado and was transferred there to face trial. But Ted wasn't going to let prison stop him. He had been studying law and knew the system better than most lawyers. On June 7, 1977, during a court hearing where he was acting as his own attorney, Ted asked to visit the law library to research his case. Once there, he hid behind a bookcase, opened a window, and jumped from the second floor of the courthouse. Ted was free for 6 days before being recaptured, but this escape proved something important. He was far more dangerous and cunning than anyone had realized. The authorities thought they had him secured, but Ted was already planning his next move. On December 30th, 1977, he executed his most daring escape yet. Over several weeks, he had been cutting a hole in the ceiling of his cell, losing over 30 pounds to fit through the small opening. When guards discovered he was missing, Ted had a 15-hour head start and was already making his way to Florida.
By January 8, 1978, Ted had reached Tallahassee and was living near Florida State University under the false name Chris Hagen. But something had changed in Ted. His careful planning and methodical approach were breaking down. The escapes had made him overconfident, and the pressure of being a fugitive was affecting his judgment. He was no longer the careful predator who had evaded capture for years. He was becoming reckless, and that would prove to be his downfall. Ted rented a room near campus and began stalking the area around the Chi Omega sorority house. The house was located in the heart of FSU's social scene, close to popular hangouts like the Sweet Shop and Red Garter nightclub. Security was minimal. College campuses in 1978 were generally considered safe places where students felt comfortable walking alone at night. The Chi Omega house had a back door with a faulty lock, something Ted had likely noticed during his surveillance of the area. On January 15, 1978, just 1 week after arriving in Tallahassee, Ted's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. Around 3 a.m., he entered the Chi Omega house through that faulty back door. Armed with a piece of oak firewood, he moved through the house like a man possessed. His first victim was 21-year-old Margaret Elizabeth Bowman. He beat her with the wooden club as she slept, then strangled her with a nylon stocking. Next, he entered the room of 20-year-old Lisa Janet Levy. He beat her unconscious, strangled her, bit deeply into her buttock, and sexually assaulted her with a hairspray bottle. The bite mark on Lisa's body would later become crucial evidence that sealed Ted's fate. In another room, he attacked roommates Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler with the same wooden club, breaking bones and causing severe injuries. But something, possibly car headlights illuminating the room, frightened Ted away before he could finish what he started. Both women survived. After fleeing the sorority house, Ted wasn't finished. Just a few blocks away, he broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, another FSU student. He beat her severely, breaking her jaw and severing a nerve near her ear that left her with permanent hearing loss. Then, like the predator he was, he disappeared into the darkness before sunrise. In less than 1 hour, Ted had attacked 5 young women, killing 2 and permanently disabling 3 others. But Ted's killing spree wasn't over. On February 9, 1978, he committed what would be his final and most disturbing crime. At Lake City Junior High School, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach was sent on an errand during the school day. She never returned to her classroom. Witnesses saw a man matching Ted's description leading a young girl to a white van. Kimberly was Ted's youngest victim, and her murder marked the complete breakdown of whatever control he had once maintained. On February 15, 1978, at 1:30 a.m., Ted's 4-year reign of terror finally came to an end on a quiet street in Pensacola, Florida. Officer David Lee of the Pensacola Police Department noticed a Volkswagen Beetle driving erratically with no headlights near the Alabama state line. When Lee ran the plates, he discovered the car was stolen. As Lee approached to make what seemed like a routine arrest for car theft, Ted attacked him. Ted tried to kick Lee's legs out from under him and made a run for it. Officer Lee fired 2 warning shots, then chased Ted down and tackled him. The 2 men fought on the ground, with Ted trying to grab Lee's gun before the officer finally subdued him. When Ted was brought to the Pensacola police station, he refused to give his real name for 2 days, using fake identification and claiming to be an FSU student named Kenneth. Detective Norman Chapman, who interviewed Ted during those first days, later said he found him strangely charming and intelligent for someone who had just been arrested for car theft and assaulting a police officer. Something didn't feel right about this articulate, well-mannered suspect. It wasn't until Ted's fingerprints were sent to the FBI that his true identity was revealed. The man in their custody was Theodore Robert Bundy, one of America's most wanted fugitives and suspected serial killer. Ted Bundy's trial for the Chi Omega murders began in June 1979 and made history as the first serial killer trial to be broadcast on national television. Ted chose to represent himself, using his law school knowledge and natural charisma to try to manipulate the proceedings. He cross-examined witnesses, objected to evidence, and even acted friendly with the judge. To many viewers, he seemed more like a smooth defense attorney than a brutal killer. But the evidence against Ted was overwhelming. Eyewitness testimony placed him at the scene. Fiber evidence linked him to the victims. Most damning of all were the bite marks on Lisa Levy's body, which perfectly matched Ted's dental impressions. Despite his legal maneuvering and charm offensive, the jury found him guilty on July 24, 1979. He was sentenced to death for the murders of Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. During his second trial in 1980 for the murder of Kimberly Leach, Ted pulled one final shocking stunt. While his girlfriend Carol Ann Boone was testifying on his behalf, Ted proposed to her in open court. Under Florida law, their public declaration constituted a legal marriage. The bizarre courtroom wedding made headlines, but it couldn't save Ted from another death sentence. For the next 10 years, Ted exhausted every possible legal appeal while sitting on death row. In his final interviews, he confessed to killing at least 30 women across 7 states between 1974 and 1978, though many experts believe the true number was much higher, possibly over 100 victims. Ted admitted he had been an amateur killer in his early years, but had evolved into what he called his predator phase by 1974. On January 24, 1989, exactly 43 years after his birth, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Outside the prison, crowds gathered to celebrate, many wearing shirts that read, "Burn, Bundy, burn." His death brought closure to the families of his known victims, but questions remain about how many other young women lost their lives to America's most charming killer. Today, the Chi Omega House still stands on the Florida State University campus, though it has been renovated and serves different purposes. A small memorial remembers Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, two bright young women whose lives were cut short by a man who proved that monsters don't always look like monsters. Ted Bundy's case changed criminal investigation forever, leading to advances in forensic science, criminal profiling, and our understanding of serial killer behavior. Ted's greatest trick wasn't escaping from those Colorado jails. It was convincing the world that evil has a recognizable face. His charming exterior allowed him to hide in plain sight for years, approaching victims who never suspected the danger until it was too late. The 30-plus women who died at his hands were daughters, sisters, and friends whose only crime was being in the wrong place when Ted decided to hunt. Next week on Accused, we'll examine another case that shocked America: how Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbors ignored the warning signs for years. Subscribe to Accused for more deep dives into the criminal mind, and remember, the most dangerous predators are often the ones you'd never suspect. Ted Bundy's story reminds us that evil rarely announces itself, and sometimes the most charming smile hides the darkest secrets.